Namaskar and welcome to NFL Masala. I'm your co-host Anant, and Rakshak unfortunately is unable to come today, but he does have a message for us. So let's listen to it now.
Namaskar, Rakshak from NFL Masala here. I know I won't be able to record for today's episode, but just give a special shout out to my boy Anant as well, man. He is a diehard Packers fan. Make sure you follow his content as well. All I can say is, with the Eagles' loss to the Commanders, I know it sucks, but still happy about this team, and it shows that without Jalen Hurts, this Eagles offense doesn't function properly as much as is being expected. And it's off to Dallas. Let's go get this dub. Go Birds, beat Dallas.
So thank you again, Rakshak. As he said, he's unable to visit today because he's traveling, and so today I will be breaking down what happened in Week 16. Breaking down what will happen in Week 17. We're almost there. We're at the penultimate week of the NFL regular season. So hopefully, let's go through what happened and what will happen in this upcoming week right now, right after our Dhamakedar news segment. So first bit of news is that previously the ex-Bucks Super Bowl winning pass rusher Shaq Barrett was previously signed to the Dolphins on a 1-year, $7 million deal, but he had announced his retirement the day before the team opened up training camp. He then filed for reinstatement in November, but then the Dolphins did not activate him, and instead they released him despite missing their top two pass rushers. And now it turns out that Shaq Barrett has re-signed with the Bucks. So he got a free $7 million contract from the Dolphins. Did not play, and then got re-signed to the Bucks again on a vet minimum, I believe. And so yeah, that's just the way it is. He he's 32 this season, and if the Bucks make the playoffs, he would be a good rotational pass rusher for them, just to add some depth, especially since they have a lack of depth in the pass rushing department. So it's good for them. Now, why the Dolphins didn't keep him? Well, that's because Chop Robinson has played well for them, and even though Jalen Phillips has been injured, he at least had 2.5 seasons, 2.5. So he's been injured, right? And Chop Robinson has been playing well, but also the Dolphins aren't in any sort of playoff contention, realistic playoff contention. They still are contenders, but with Tua being injured, possibly not going to play this week, Tyreek possibly not going to play this week, it seems like more than likely the Dolphins are going to miss the playoffs this year. Whereas with the Bucks, they definitely have the potential to win the NFC South division itself and not just become a wild card team. Now, based on what happened this past week, I will get into why it's still a race and not guaranteed for them. But yeah, so that is it with the first bit of news. The second bit of news. Surprise, surprise. Teddy Bridgewater, another unretires after being a head coach for a local high school, winning the state championship. Winning the state championship, and then coming back and is now trying to come back to the Lions. Okay. As a QB, as a depth QB, weeks after he coached for his high school alma mater to a state championship, he is coming back as a backup quarterback. Now, they do have Hendon Hooker, a rookie that they drafted, and Dan Campbell said that just because Bridgewater has returned does not mean that the team is disappointed with their current backup quarterback in Hendon Hooker. Maybe this is just Teddy's way of saying, hey, look, I just want to get a ring and I want to join the team that has the best possibility to win a ring. Anything happens to Jared Goff, knock on wood for Detroit Lions fans, at least Teddy Bridgewater knows that offensive system to a certain extent and can still perform a bit of, backup duties if the need arise. So yeah, it's very interesting that Bridgewater unretired as a high school state championship winning head coach and then just go back to the NFL. I don't think it's ever happened. Maybe it has happened, but I don't remember anything that of anything like that happening before. So if you guys have, please let us know. But yeah, that was another interesting thing. Now let's move on from the Makadar news and into something that we do actually want to talk about, and that is the Week 16 recap, starting with the Packers and the Saints. Now, if the Saints offensive players had actually been healthy this entire season, and if by some miracle they had turned off injuries and they had played exactly like they had played in the first 2 weeks of the season, it might have been a closer game. But guess what happened? That didn't happen. Their players were injured. They came into Lambeau Field preparing. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. To prepare for a cold weather game like Lambeau, Wisconsin, during the winter, they decided that they would train in a ice box. So that's what the QB decided. That's what I believe the head coach of the Saints said, or the quarterbacks coach of the Saints said, is the way that Spencer Rattler, who was the quarterback for this game, trained for this game was throughout the week. He was put in an ice box, like a commercial ice fridge, and trained in that environment, I guess. Like somehow that replicates the intense lack of warmth that you would feel at Lambeau, and the wind whipping on your face from the bay, and then you would have like thousands and thousands of spotlights on you, tens of thousands of fans screaming like that. That's somehow going to replicate that environment is asinine to me. Okay, now at least they tried, but probably a better way to practice would have been booking a flight and playing or practicing at like a local high school stadium or something like that. Maybe that probably would have helped, or like going to I don't know, going to a nearby facility and training. Like that probably would have helped more than the stupid icebox example. But even if they did train in a facility that was, akin to the weather conditions that you would face at Lambeau Field, they still could not have done anything, because guess what? The Packers were clinical. It was so clinical, in fact, that it was the first shutout of this NFL season by any team in the NFL. And also, if it wasn't a shutout, this would have been the first time in the NFL, or it likely would have led to a path of being the first time in NFL history where there would have been no shutouts in the entire season. But guess what? We did not cross that bridge, because the Packers defense and the Packers team itself, coaches, front office, players, everyone executed basically perfectly in this game and provided complete and utter dominance at home. It was so dominant, in fact, that the Packers offense rested Josh Jacobs, who is, by the way, either fourth or fifth in the NFL in terms of rushing yards, in the second quarter. Right? They rested him in the second quarter, and Jordan Love was rested in the fourth after the score was 27-0. And Malik Willis comes in as probably the best backup we've seen in past couple of years, maybe besides Joe Flacco last year for the Browns, or last year, and just immediately scored a touchdown to Jaden Reed. So yeah, complete utter dominance. Now the box scores don't show the whole story because Jordan Love on the box score was probably not the best, highlights. It's not like a Joe Burrow 35 out of 50, 410 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 picks. It's not that type of a performance, but it still didn't matter because in game, if you turn on the film, he was very efficient. There were very few throws that he had missed, and he did miss some throws. Some of them were also tipped passes, and that is something that, the Packers might have to figure out in the offseason. Maybe some of the throwing mechanics is warranting a lot of those tipped passes, but there was a couple of tipped passes where Jalen Saunders almost intercepted a defensive lineman for the Saints, almost intercepted a tip pass. Like, it was that close in terms of those inefficiencies. But besides those small inefficiencies, everything else was basically perfect. Now, the story of this game was not the offense, but the defense. And I think this is the first time I've said, as a Packers fan for about 15 years, our defense is phenomenal. I mean, this is very akin to what the Super Bowl year defense was in 2010, especially that pass defense, because here, man, the Packers pass rush pressured Spencer Rattler 20 times, generating 3 sacks and a season high 52.6% team pressure rate. 8 different defensive linemen had multiple pressures. And in terms of leaders, you have Brenton Cox Jr., who I'm going to give a little bit of a shout out in the future. 6 pressures. Lucas Van Ness, first round draft pick, 5 pressures. Rashawn Gary, who had a very, very poor start to the beginning of the season, has in recent weeks, picked up a ton, especially in terms of run defense. He had 4 pressures, and Devontae Wyatt, who's also coming on strong towards the end of the season, with 3 pressures. So it seems like everybody is gelling well, even though we traded Preston Smith away. Our pass rush has probably gotten even better. Now, yes, we have faced terrible offensive lines like the Seahawks and the Saints, but still, you only face the teams that you face. So if you generate this much amount of pass rush with with this type of momentum, it'll only lead to more positive things, right? If you have this momentum as a defensive lineman, if you know you can bully the offensive line of the opposing team, you know that you can carry the same confidence in the next week. And if you do face a tougher offensive line, which for the NFC playoffs, which we will definitely face tougher offensive lines than the Saints and the Seahawks, but when you do, you know that you have the capability to generate pass rush and to affect the quarterback. And this is how dominant it was for our defense. 14 first downs allowed, only 67 rushing yards on 20 attempts. So that's a 3.3 basically yards per attempt actually. And 153 yards of passing. That's it. 50% completion percentage. an interception, 3 sacks, total yards of just under 200, whereas we had 400 yards of offense, 2 turnovers, 1 fumble, and an interception. And we also caused them to go 4 of 11 on third down and 0 for 2 on fourth down, and control them to just 22 minutes of offense. And it seemed like there was literally very little that the Saints could do. I mean, they had maybe had a couple of drives where they were getting first downs on first downs, but then they just bogged down around midfield with penalties and just the pass rush getting to Spencer Rattler and hurrying him up. You know, it's not like he had 18 seconds, which is what Joe Barry would have done last year, Bryce Young and Baker Mayfield. So this is one of the best things to have happened to the Packers in the past half decade, is this defense is legitimately trending towards a Super Bowl quality defense. And that is exciting as a Packers fan. Now, I wanted to mention Brenton Cox, and here's why. Since the Preston Smith trade, right, he has really, really outshined. And just this past week, amongst edge defenders in week 16, so that includes every single pass rusher, first in PFF grade, third in pass rush grade, third in pass rush win rate at 44% nearly, and third in pressure rate at 31.3%. So in week 16, he was a top 5 edge rusher on playing like 20% of the snaps. And the shocking thing is he was a 5-star high school recruit into college. Now he was he didn't have the best college career, and when he was drafted, there was really no he didn't really show a lot of success. But even last year, I started hearing his name coming up more often. And now, under the leadership of Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark, and having, similar type of players in Kingsley Enagbare, who's a 5th-round pick, who have really shown that they have the capability to be an effective pass rusher, especially in this system. And then now bringing in Jeff Hafley, having the confidence, like one of the reasons why Preston Smith was traded at that trade deadline was because the coaches had so much confidence in Brenton Cox. And once he shifted away from just special team snaps and pure pass rush and defensive snaps, and we saw some of those, some of that athletic talent really show on the field, coaches got the idea that, hey, this guy can actually be a force to be reckoned with for defenses. And now it's showing, like, especially with having players like Kenny Clark and Rashawn Gary eat up blockers, has really allowed Brenton Cox to win the one-on-one matchups that he gets typically, especially on the edge. And with the way that Jeff Hafley designs stunts and designs sim pressures and using all these modern defensive principles to create more havoc in the trenches, is really, really helped Brenton Cox flourish, along with his athletic ability of just ripping it with speed and power. So I'm really excited for him to show up. And as we mentioned before, total team pressures as per PFF, Rashawn Gary had 6. Brenton Cox had 6. Rashawn Gary had 4 or 5, depending on which service you use and which service measures these pressures. So you had like 8 to 10 different players get a pressure in this game. And we also created NFL history in this game. 30-plus point shutout. 400-plus offensive yards while allowing under 200. 0 offensive turnovers, 0 fumbles, 0 sacks taken, and 0 missed kicks. This is the first time in NFL history someone has done All of that in the same exact game. This is the level of utter dominance we showed. Now, all of you NFC North fans are like, oh my God, it's just the Saints. Okay. Vikings, you faced the Jaguars with Mac fucking Jones. You couldn't do this with your vaunted defense and Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Aaron Jones and Kevin O'Connell, coach of the year. You couldn't do this. You barely beat them 12-9. We beat the Jaguars on a much bigger scale with Trevor Lawrence. You guys couldn't even beat Mac Jones. And even the Lions, when they when they whooped all those teams, people weren't saying, oh, the Lions didn't deserve this victory, or, oh, it was just, the pathetic team. They were like, okay, this is exactly what you do to pathetic teams. Well, why isn't that the case for the Packers as well? Why is it that differentiation? Saying, oh, it's just the Saints offensive line. So what if you get 3 sacks? So what if you get so many pressures? So what if you get a shutout? It's a shutout. It is hard to restrict an NFL offense to 0 points in an entire NFL game. It is hard to do that. So Packers should get some credit for this. Yes, it was a bad team. Yes, it was a rookie QB. It was an interim head coach. It was the Saints, injured to high heaven. But it is still an NFL team. It is still any given Sunday in the NFL. And we see that so many times with the amount of upsets that are pulled. It is any given Sunday. So, yeah, let's cut the Packers. We'll give the Packers some credit for putting on an absolute, a bomb, like a just fantastic performance. All right, now since Rakshak is not here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Eagles because, man, this was one of the games of the year. And it was made one of the games of the year because Jalen got hurt. Okay, all bad jokes aside, it was actually a terrible, terrible hit to the head. He suffered a gruesome concussion. We don't know the extent. We know that he's not playing this upcoming week versus the Cowboys, so it's probably going to be maybe Kenny Pickett or Ian Book against Cooper Rush and the Cowboys. So it was probably maybe a dirty hit. Eagles fans are going to say it's a dirty hit. Non-Eagles fans are going to say it's not a dirty hit. It was still a very bad hit to the head. And he got a concussion in the first quarter. And this was key not because of the pass game per se, but what he provides in the running game, which is extra support for Saquon on rushes and on money downs, on like scrambles and on money downs, of keeping the game progressing because of Jalen Hurts' rushing ability. It's like if you take Lamar Jackson out of the Ravens, you not only lose his passing efficiency, you also lose out on the dynamic that he provides in the running game with Derrick Henry. It's like a supercharged offense or just a V8 with the supercharger. If you take the supercharger out of a V8 engine, it's still a V8 engine, but it's not as powerful as it was before. That's what this is akin to. On money downs in the second, third, and fourth downs, basically. Sorry. On money downs this week in the non-Jalen Hurts quarters, they were 19th in rushing success rate. What does that mean? Saquon Barkley had a good game. He had 150 plus rushing yards, I believe. So they were able to move the ball down the field. But in key situations, so on money downs, third and fourth downs, they were unable to convert, which is what led them to have a lot of field goals rather than a lot of touchdowns, especially in the later quarters. Kenny Pickett is obviously not a starting caliber quarterback, and it really, really, really showed, right? But what does this rushing stat mean? 19th in rush success rate in the non-Jalen quarters, so second, third, and fourth quarters of this game during this week amongst the NFL. It means that the efficiency of gaining yards in the running game, which is what the success rate entails, was very, very low, almost towards the bottom third of the league this week without Jalen Hurts. So they weren't able to execute on key downs with Pickett, and they wasted 5 turnovers. Now, all Commanders fans out there, this does not state that the Commanders did not deserve this win. Okay? They do, because that offense was, despite the 5 turnovers, routinely picking apart this Eagles defense. Now, yes, Eagles fans, you're complaining that, the Eagles defense was gassed out. And CJGJ had, was ejected with the first penalty that should have been on Washington, but he was ejected. It doesn't matter. Okay? It doesn't matter. If you're facing this, if you're claiming to be a top 5 defense, a top 3 defense, you can't let issues hinder your ability to make plays. And that's what happened. Quinyon Mitchell, who was supposed to be Quinyanamo Bay, allowed Scary Terry to score on that touchdown. Scary Terry broke out of Quinyanamo Bay. Like, these are critical mistakes that were made that allowed the Commanders to execute at a much higher level than the Eagles defense did. And you have to take accountability for that. You have to take ownership for that. You can't just use Jalen Hurts' injury to excuse the lack of effectiveness from the Eagles defense, even if they were gassed. Because if you're a top 5 defense, you have to figure out a way. Right? This is crunch time. Now you lose on the ability to probably get the number 1 seed. So, yes, Jalen Hurts' injury was a critical factor in this loss. And Jake Elliott missed a field goal. Okay, it was 36-33 Commanders. Jake Elliott missed a field goal to tie the game. And yes, there was a lot of ref ball. But there is ref ball every single game. I proclaimed so much ref ball during the Eagles-Packers game, but what did I hear? It's the game. You got to play. You got to win. Same thing here. Same thing here. So credit to Jaden Daniels, credit to the Commanders for pulling out a victory against a top 5 defense. Yes, they were in a disadvantageous position, but this is the NFL. You are going to be in disadvantageous positions. When the Packers lost David Bakhtiari for the 2020 playoffs, we were in a significant disadvantageous position, and it showed. We lost that NFC Championship game by, we lost it by 1 score. And there was significant ref ball. But what did the non-Packers fans say at that point? You lost. You choked. You can't make excuses. It is the NFL. You got to take what you can, and you have to execute as effectively as you possibly can. Right? So, yeah, credit to the Commanders. They deserve the win because they didn't let their turnovers phase them. And it was one of the games of the year. Hands down. Alrighty, moving on to the Masala games of the week. I'm just going to talk about my game because I was not there to look at the Chiefs and the Texans. So in terms of the Steelers versus Ravens, I'm just going to keep it short. It was a close game until the fourth quarter. It was the second game for the Steelers in 11 days. They just played their third game versus the Chiefs on Wednesday. That did not go well. and it clearly showed. Even the second game clearly showed just the amount of toll that was on the Steelers without George Pickens. And especially that defense, man, that run defense just was absolutely demolished up front. Now, I said what I said about that Ravens run game. If they top 150 rushing yards, they're going to win this game. Guess what? They had 220 rushing yards this game versus the Steelers, and they won 34-17 because of that fact. Right? It was one of the most, if you were like a football nerd and very interested in the intricacies of football game design and offensive play calling and play design, this was the, especially if you're a football, you know, uh, uh, football masochist and you really are interested in like offensive line play, right? Not masochist, that's the wrong word. Yeah, if you really like the nitty-gritty details and really love offensive line play, this was the game to watch because there was a beautiful run game designed by Todd Monken that relied a lot on the trap scheme and on pin and pull. And you could clearly see that. Credit to Brandon Thorne, who is a huge resource, especially during the offseason and for scouting purposes for the NFL draft for offensive line talent. He's a really good resource to go to on Twitter, so definitely check him out. He had mentioned and he had showed the amount of in like unique plays that they had in the trap in the trap scheme and in pin and pull. So needless to say, that unique run game design allowed for Derrick Henry to have 110 out of his 162 yards before contact. And that represents, if we do the math here, that's 68% of Derrick Henry's yards were before he was contacted by any defensive player. And if you're a football fan who has at least 5 years of knowledge, you know that Derrick Henry is one of those running backs where he gets stronger the more he gets hit. So literally the only way to stop Derrick Henry is to hit him behind the line of scrimmage. If you allow him to get steam, he's a runaway freight train at that point, and it clearly showed. He had 110 yards before contact. And what does that mean? That means that the scheme and the offensive play caller and the offensive line controlled the trenches and then controlled the game that way. This is why Rakshak and I always have that mantra. Build through the trenches, Namaha. Build through the trenches, Namaha. Build through the trenches, Namaha. Why? Because it allows you to do stuff like this. If you have such an effective running game, that only leads to a very effective and precise passing game. You see that trend all over and over and over and over again. If you have a positive running game, it feeds into a positive passing game. And especially if you have a talented quarterback like Lamar Jackson, it's set. I mean, it was clean precision passing. Yes, he had a couple of throws. Everybody does, you know. But they mainly targeted just Zay Flowers and the two tight ends, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Mark Andrews has been really popping off in like the last 8 or 10 weeks or something. I read this. He had like 8 or 9 touchdowns in the last, 10 weeks. It's insane. He has been a touchdown machine in the red zone. And that's what we had hoped in the beginning of the season. But unfortunately, because of, injuries and some other issues that he had, he wasn't that. But now, as you go towards crunch time, later the season, going into the playoffs, The Ravens are heating up just at the right time. Now, I know we say this every single year. The Ravens are heating up. They play well in December. They roll into January and then they choke. So this year is a defining year, right? This is the year for Lamar Jackson to prove his haters wrong, that he does not choke in the playoffs, that it is, other circumstances. This is the year to prove that. You know, this is the year where you basically have two contenders. You have the Bills and the Chiefs. So you have to prove that you are more than capable of beating your wild card opponent, whether that's the Chargers, the Steelers, the Bengals, the Broncos, if they make it in, the Colts, or whoever makes it in, right? Because I think the Ravens win the AFC North at this point, because now both the Steelers and the Ravens are tied, but I believe if I check the standings right now, if we check the standings, Baltimore technically has the lead because they're 11-5, whereas the Steelers are 10-6. Now this is because they already played their Week 17 game on Saturday. Not Saturday, on Christmas Day, right? It was Steelers Chiefs on Christmas Day and Ravens Texans, and they utterly demolished the Texans. So because they did that, they have the lead now of the AFC North. Most likely they're going to win the division at that point. So because of that fact, they're probably just going to face either the Dolphins who get in, or the Steelers, or the Bengals, or the Colts, or the Chargers, or the Broncos, right? Whoever gets into that last wild card spot is what the Ravens will ultimately face. Who will ultimately face. So so this is the year for them to prove that they can beat the team that is less than them and move on to the actual contenders. Right? Just like last year, but last year they had the defense and their offense just completely and utterly sputtered out of they didn't stick to their identity. But now they have Derrick Henry. They can stick to their identity easier. So that's what we have to see. Now, there was one sequence of events during this game, going back to the Steelers and Ravens, where there was one interception from both teams within the span of like a minute and a half. All right. So you have the beginning of the fourth quarter is a 4th and 6 attempt from the Steelers. They are down 24-17. They're at the Baltimore 45. So they're basically going to go for it at that point, which is what they should. And they go for it, but it's incomplete to Calvin Austin. So they turn it over on downs. What happens? Derrick Henry runs for 44 yards. He was unstoppable. He runs for 44 yards, and the Ravens are basically in the red zone. They are in the red zone. They're close to the end zone. It's 1st and 10 at the 11, and Lamar Jackson throws an interception. It was supposed to be intended for Rashad Bateman, but Minkah Fitzpatrick just makes a great play, reads it well, and intercepts the ball and returns it. And immediately after that, the second play after that, the first play, Najee Harris runs for 3 yards. The second play, Russell Wilson throws a pick, which was intended for Mecole Pruitt, intercepted by Marlon Humphrey, and returned for a pick 6. And that was the dagger. That was 30-17 at that point. And the Steelers, man, that just summed up the entire game. Too many mistakes over and over and over again. Too many penalties. Once they got into the red zone, they made too many mistakes. They had a fumble before. They had an interception. They had the pick 6. It was just like the Steelers' magic is running out now. And we clearly saw that versus the Chiefs. Like they were out. Right? That their black magic was done. The devil magic and satanic worship of the Chiefs had taken it over and clearly wiped out whatever the Steelers had. So I don't know how they get their offense back. Maybe it is George Pickens. And he did play, I believe, in the Chiefs game, but he wasn't that effective. So yeah, it's looks like another quarterback change, maybe. But Russell Wilson ain't about to solve their playoff woes. That's for sure. Last but not least, that Ravens D line was also able to control that Steelers offensive line in the run game. And I was actually, during going into this offseason, I was a big proponent of the Steelers offensive line. I thought that they had made some very nice moves, bringing in nice young talent. But it just seems like their run game has been, from the beginning of this year, just completely ineffective. If we were to take a look at some of their stats, offensively speaking, right? Um, yeah, Steelers offense. Let's look at rushing. 22nd in the league, rushing EPA per rush. So EPA per rush, 22nd in the league. And if you look at success rate, it's even worse at 24th in the league. So literally bottom third in the league in terms of running ability. They're in the same league as somehow the Bears, Colts, Titans, Seahawks, Patriots, Jets. Like that league is where they're at. And so it clearly shows that they have a lot of work to do in the running game, whether it's getting new running backs, whether it's fixing up their interior offensive line. They have to do something because this game was not it, and this entire season was not it. They had 2.1 yards per carry before contact average from both Warren and Najee Harris. So it was just not that effective. That's more indicative of the offensive line more than anything. But the only thing that was actually saving the Steelers from complete annihilation was some busted deep plays by Calvin Austin. Like that's basically it. But yeah, other than that, I mean this run game, man, they have to figure something out because it's not effective. I mean, you can't be a consistent playoff contender without at least a top 12 rushing offense. Like something to stave, like unless you have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, you are not going to be a successful offense. And it shows. Like this past week in week 16, they were basically tied with the Browns in terms of they were, where were they? Yeah, they were 14th in the 14th that during that week of rushing EPA. So EPA per rush. So yeah, that was not effective, and their pass game was not at all effective when you look at not having George Pickens. So I thought that they would target Pat Freiermuth a little bit more, especially over the middle, but they weren't able to do that because of pressure from the Ravens defensive line, and they just completely controlled the Steelers from the start. So yeah, overall it was, I mean, technically a close game, but it just seemed like the Ravens had the victory set once that interception happened, or once that turnover on downs happened in the fourth quarter, and that Derrick Henry run happened. It just seemed like it was kind of over, and obviously that pick helped for the Steelers, bring some momentum back, but then that pick six just like completely killed any hope that they had. So yeah, just one too many mistakes and not a solid run game. All right, time to finish off what happened in. Oh, well, actually, not finish off. Time to go through the best segment that we have, and that is the Punch Minute Recap. All right. Broncos 27, Chargers 34. Chargers win. Broncos chargered it again. Looks like Jim Harbaugh has rubbed off on the Broncos of the Charger curse because the Broncos had a lead 24-13 in the third quarter, and Lord Harbaugh channeled all the righteous forces of football through King Herbert and destroyed the Broncos, putting a curse on them forever of charging it. That's what they did. Bengals 24, Browns 6. Look, Browns need a quarterback, okay? It's just too bad that they restructured the worst contract for the worst quarterback in history, and now it seems like Deshaun Watson is staying there for at least 3 more years. So more quarterback help for the Browns, and it's exactly what the organization deserves. Not the football, not the team per se, but that organization. Not the fans, definitely not the fans. But the organization deserves for what they did. Colts 38, Titans 30. It seems like it's a close game, but it basically wasn't because Jonathan Taylor was so scarred from doing the cardinal sin of a ball carrier. All right. And that is tossing the ball away when they're basically about to enter the touchdown, enter the end zone, right? And about to score a touchdown. You just toss the ball away or drop the ball and it becomes a fumble. That's a cardinal sin for all ball carriers. You cannot do that. I don't know why players in college and the NFL still continue to do it every single year, right? This has to be something that has to be like drilled with military precision into every single football player and every single ball carrier. Never drop the ball until you're well into the end zone. And he got so scarred from that one incident last week or the week prior that he had one of the best running games that you could have from a running back in the past couple of years. Right? Even with that garbage time comeback from Will Levis and the Titans, it wasn't enough to overcome that 200 plus rushing yard and 3 touchdown game from Jonathan Taylor. He won a lot of fantasy teams and lost a lot of fantasy teams with that one performance. All right, up next, Rams 19, Jets 9. It was a rematch of the old veteran rivals, but it was sadly broken by the fact that the Jets are struggling to survive a single game. And well, Erod is close to 500 touchdown passes, and Devontae Adams is close to getting third in the list of QB and wide receiver duo in most prolific QB and wide receiver duo in NFL history in terms of a touchdown. He just needs 1 touchdown to get that. So both Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams just need 1 touchdown to reach those milestones. And that's probably what the Jets have to play for this week, is just that milestone. Otherwise, like, they're eliminated from the playoffs. Their organization is going to be completely restructured, hopefully by Jets fans, this upcoming offseason. Maybe Aaron Rodgers stays, maybe he doesn't. Maybe they just burn down the entire team, burn down the stadium, move the team, like sell the team away from New York. Who knows? But that team is done. All right, this team is done. This defense is done. You take the 3 players that you have and you do like a complete restart, right? Just hit that power restart button on the franchise, and you take, the 5 players that you have. Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Will McDonald, Quinnen Williams, Breece Hall. You take those 5 players, you maybe entice Aaron Rodgers on getting like a cap restructure, coming back as a veteran, backup, draft a quarterback, or maybe sign another quarterback, and you try and rebuild for next year, especially that offensive line. So, yeah. Actually, you can get rid of Will McDonald and get Olu Fashanu. Like he should be their cornerstone um, left tackle for the foreseeable future, but he also got injured. So, yeah. Anyways, Bills 24, Pats 21. I mean, this was another divisional game that just got down to the wire, and somehow the Patriots had a fighting chance here. Even though May was pressured more than 30% of his dropbacks and the run game sucked, they still had a fighting chance against the second, the best team in the AFC, in my opinion, in the Bills, because fuck the Chiefs. Yeah, at least the Pats fans are happy that Drake May's here. Though this offseason, it looks like the Patriots are going to need a whole new offense. You have Drake May, and you maybe have Ramondre Stevenson, and maybe Jalen Polk or Javon Baker that you guys drafted. I still have high hopes for Javon Baker, but he has not seen any touches so far. So you need to completely retool that offensive line, completely retool that wide receiving group, probably bringing in T. Higgins or some other receiver. So, yeah. All right. Jesus. Raiders 19, Jags 14. Yay. More Tank Bolathon. And the Raiders, man, the Raiders, they ruined their tank and tanked their draft stock from number 1 or 2 to number 6. Missing out on the top 2 QB prospects. What are the Raiders doing? I mean, they're probably going to have to trade back up into the top 3 spots now. Like, they can't even tank right. And Antonio Pierce came out and he was like, I don't care about tanking. I just care about playing the game and winning, which is fair. I mean, that's what you expect. But yeah, that is that. From the NFC side, Falcons 34, Giants 7. Somehow the Falcons defense got 2 pick sixes against Drew Lock, and Michael Penix looked decent. Not great, not terrible, just middle of the road, good enough for a rookie start. And it's a good push for the playoffs. If they somehow get into the playoffs, Kirk Cousins is on the bench, and they face the Vikings, and they beat the Vikings. That would be chef's kiss for this for this season. If the Vikings lose to Michael Penix and the Falcons with Kirk Cousins on the bench, fantastic. All right. Lions 34, Bears 17. The Bears still suck. The Bears still suck. The Bears still suck. And the organization has failed another quarterback. Everyone is miserable, and it clearly shows. And it's such a joy being a non-Bears fan and a Packers fan. It's just watching the misery that the Chicago Bears are putting out on the field. The fans are in disarray. They are wholeheartedly, completely against Caleb Williams now. Like they had crowned him during this offseason as the champion of champions, the one who's going to overthrow Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, the one who's going to overthrow the NFC North. They're going to run the NFC North. That's what their GM had said, Ryan Poles, and they're never going to take it back. Guess what? In the past 4 Bears general managers, he has had the worst record of the past 4 general managers for the Bears. Worst win-loss record. I mean, just goes to show they're doing it all over again. Even if, like, this is how bad the Bears organization is in terms of developing a quarterback. Even if they were to have drafted Patrick Mahomes, he would have been if they were if they were to draft Patrick Mahomes in that 2017 draft, that guy would not have been worth a $500 million. He would have been a backup on, I don't know, some team right now. He probably would have been maybe out of the league because that's how horrendous this organization is. And guess what, Bears fans? It's your choice. You can continue to support this pathetic, miserable, dumbass organization, or you cannot support them. Right? Don't support them. Don't give them anything. Don't buy season tickets. Don't buy regular game tickets because you know inevitably something has to be changed here. And the only way it changes is if there's monumental pressure for that change to happen. And as long as you continue supporting the Bears, as long as you continue to champion them as offseason champions, offseason warriors, you're never going to change. And this is the misery that you deserve. All right, moving on. Panthers 36, Cards 30. The Carolina Reaper has another victim this game. It went into overtime. The Cardinals' playoff chance just evaporated with this loss. Thanks to that Carolina Reaper, Bryce Young. Vikings 27. Sea Chickens 24. Geno Smith has done it again. Another game-ending interception. And it was, again, a lack of communication with DK Metcalf that led to that interception. And, again, the Vikings scrape by. This is the same team that we completely demolished, by the way, Vikings. And you barely scrape by them. Good job. Good job for that vaunted offense and defense. Coach of the year, Kevin O'Connell. All right. Dolphins 29, Niners 17. Niners eliminated the same week the Cowboys have been eliminated. Let's go. Let the glory days reign. Speaking of Cowboys 26, Bucks 24. Baker nearly baked a fantastic comeback, but the craziest play happened, which is, surprise, surprise, my Masala moment of the week. And speaking of which, let's show what happened in that game. All right, so I'm going to be sharing my screen. All righty. So as you can see here, it's 24-26, 140 to go in the game, one timeout left, and you got 1st and 10 at the 26-yard line. It looks like Baker's probably in the, well, I guess shotgun formation, but the back is structured towards the offensive line. And it looks like they're in 11 personnel because they got 3 receivers there. You got that one tight end over there. You got the running back coming in as a pass blocker. And you can clearly see that the Cowboys bring on a blitz because you got 5 defenders in the secondary against 4 receivers, and you got a lot of defensive pressure here, and you got that corner blitz right there. That slot corner blitz coming in from this end, and he puts Baker Mayfield in immediate pressure, like completely unblocked. Immediate pressure, but somehow Baker manages to keep his feet up, drive forward, escape the sack, shovel pass it to Rachaad White, who is somehow holding on to the ball with one hand on one side and the other guy trying to tackle him and stiff-arming that Cowboys defender. But then going up, now he faces Deron Bland. He is at the 30-yard line. It's almost a 5-yard gain, but then it's completely ripped out of the hands by Deron Bland, and it is a fumble. A fumble recovered by Deron Bland, and that just ends the game right there. I mean, but just watch this effort by Baker Mayfield. He's obviously, thoroughly flummoxed as to what happened here, but he is, you know, just about to. He makes an incredible play. Rashad White makes an incredible play grabbing it, but then Deron Bland just wins it for the Cowboys with another defensive turnover and just wins the game right then and there. And it goes to show that this Cowboys defense is on the up and up. If you were to look at their defense from, let's say, I believe like week 10 onwards, um, yeah, week 10 onwards, they have been the second best pass defense in terms of EPA per dropback. And if you look at success rate, they are 17th in the league. So in terms of EPA per pass, EPA per dropback, it's second in the league since week 10. Now, obviously, rush defense is not good, and they never were good that um, this this year. But they have been making some incredible plays in the passing game on defense. So credit to them. They made the play. And now this is for Rakshak's Masala moment of the week. And I just had to show it because this was the actual Masala moment of the week. This has never been done before. I don't know how, but this has never, ever, probably never, ever done before. And this just goes to the creativity that Ben Johnson has. And now you can see that Jared Goff is under center with Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield. It looks like they're in 11 personnel because you got 12 personnel because you got 2 tight ends here and 2 wide receivers on the outside on a 1-by-1. So you got 2 tight ends lining up, and it's a designed stumble, where they fall on the ground. Now, obviously, Jared Goff doesn't fall on the ground, but it's a designed stumble, gets up. There's like a tight end leak, and it's a touchdown to Sam Laporta. Now, the Lions are up 27-14. The game is basically done, and this seals it. I mean, I have never, ever seen this type of creativity shown on the field where you're actively using a mistake. And this is what Amon-Ra St. Brown had discussed on his show, is that the inspiration for this play was when Jordan Love, I believe last year facing the this Chicago Bears, surprise, surprise, actually stumbled, put the ball on the ground, picked it back up, and had pressure in his face and made an incredible play for a first down. They used that inspiration and made it an actual play design. So he said that this play had been called previously before, but they didn't have the right defensive look for them, but they just called it again when they did. And you saw it was like man coverage straight across. They're basically in base defense, 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, got 2 safeties and 2 corners. And when you do run this, you clearly see that they're in base defense. So yeah, that Chicago Bears defense was completely flummoxed. And who wouldn't be? All right. Who wouldn't be? All right. So this concludes the week 14 recap. Week 15 recap. And now we move on to week 16. Oh, sorry. This was week 16 recap. And now we move on to week 17. My God. Wow, we are almost done. We are almost done, guys. All right. So week 17. What's going to happen? Penultimate week. And the Packers are facing the Vikings. Very, very critical game tomorrow. The Packers are facing the Vikings. Again, it's Vikings week. And look, last time, I understand. It was initially very one-sided. We were down 21 points at the end of the first half. Basically looked like the game had ended at there. But the game actually ended so close, 31-29. We were one field goal away with a weak and injured recovering Jordan Love. This is week 5 of the NFL, mind you, of the regular season. It's way back in like October. And 2 missed field goals eventually cost us this game. Now, since then, we've had basically a top 7 defense and a top 2 pass defense, and the best kicker in the second best kicker in the NFC North, if you consider Jake Bates. But our kicking situation has dramatically improved since then, with Brandon McManus routinely making in kicks. And I feel like just now I just jinxed him, so I'm going to knock on wood. All right. Now you have Toyotathon Love coming into town, into Minneapolis. And obviously, surprise, surprise to Minneapolis and dumbass US Bank and dumbass Minneapolis, Minnesota. Fake snow is apparently going to be piped into the stadium for the fans. Weak sauce. Actually play outside, you dumbass morons. But anyways, it should be a much, much closer game with Toyotathon Love coming in. Of a top 3, top 2 rushing attack coming in, top 10 defense, and a very, very good kicking game. So Packers, what do we do well? Recently, we start hot. Offensively speaking, like throughout the season, Matt LaFleur has made it a key to not defer, but to receive the ball if we win the coin toss. And we've seen that repeatedly. We've received the ball. And what happened in the earlier parts of the season? We received the ball and we punt. That first offensive drive is not enough and is not critical or is not capitalized on. Sorry. But now, week after week after week, we've capitalized on that first drive. We've capitalized on their first drive, and recently, with almost precision, with perfection, we've turned it into touchdowns. So this is where the Packers are really good at. They're 7th in the league in points that we score in the first quarter, especially in the last 3 games that we faced. And on the season, away, so not at home, but away, we are 2nd in the league in terms of scoring first quarter points. First happens to be Minneapolis, but they're playing at home. So we have a very, very high probability of scoring a touchdown on the first drive and scoring a lot of points in the first quarter. And it continues in the second quarter because we actually improve in the second quarter. 6th in the league in second quarter points and 3rd overall EPA per play since week 11, or AKA Toyotathon Love. This is what we mean by Toyotathon Love. And I mentioned this last week over and over again. Toyotathon Love is a subset of the season where Jordan Love has activated his superpowers and is basically elite. Now, also, part of the reasons why we're so successful in the first half of the game, especially recently, is because of the amount of emphasis we put on Josh Jacobs. And we see this clearly week in, week out, especially if you look on film. I mean, I broke down how we played against the Seahawks. That first drive where we scored a touchdown in Seattle and basically put the game away in the first quarter was Josh Jacobs, Josh Jacobs, Josh Jacobs, Josh Jacobs, and maybe a Jordan Love scramble, and Josh Jacobs, Josh Jacobs, Josh Jacobs touchdown. Like that. That's how effective Josh Jacobs has been, and he has been the tone setter for us. Him and the offensive line have been the tone setter in the first quarter, and it really shows. Josh Jacobs is first in EPA in rushing success rate and second in EPA per rush in the first half since week 11. And that's what the Packers offense is, rushing offense, which is basically all Josh Jacobs at that point. Josh Jacobs and the offensive line. So number 1 in rushing success rate and number 2 in EPA per rush in the first half since week 11. And it clearly shows that is our formula. That is our mantra. And that is what LaFleur has built this entire offseason off, this entire regular season success on in the offense is that run game. Right? We've harped on this, on his creativity in the run game week in and week out, and it especially shows in the first half. And this is how effective it can be. And this is something that the Packers definitely have to continue because this defense is a pretty weak rushing defense in the first half. 14th in rushing success rate since week 11. So they can definitely be run on. It won't be the Seahawks, but it definitely can be run on in the first half. And if we stick to that formula, that is golden. So sticking to Josh Jacobs in the running game, sprinkling in Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks when Josh Jacobs gets tired, that is a key to success for the Packers offense. Another key would be to target the running backs out of the backfield in terms of the passing. And this can be throughout the entire game because Minnesota is 10th in DVOA, which is their weakest sector amongst wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. Well, other than wide receiver 1 when they're in like man-to-man coverage. But this is a key thing because Josh Jacobs has recently been on a tear for the Packers, and it especially shows in the pass game as well, in the receiving game that he provides, along with Emmanuel Wilson in the backfield, and some of the gadgetry that we get from Christian Watson and Bo Melton and Jaden Reed. And I think this is going to be a really good game for Jaden Reed coming out of the backfield as a rusher and as a decoy and as a pass catcher coming out of the backfield. I think this is a game that LaFleur can really up his creative juices and provide Jaden Reed some of those touches. And against Minnesota, I read this somewhere from one of the Packers analysts that Jaden Reed has had consecutive like 70-plus yard scrimmage games against Minnesota and touchdowns in every single matchup that he has played. So this is definitely going to be one of those, again, Jaden Reed games against Minnesota because he's a guy that we should target out of the backfield and use him as a gadget player out of the backfield. And another player, the last bit of thing that we should target is Tucker Kraft. Right, Minnesota is 7th amongst against tight ends in terms of DVOA, and Tucker Kraft currently amongst NFL tight ends. This is on the entire season, by the way. This is not like 2-week span. He is 2nd in yards per reception at 14 yards, 2nd in yards after catch over expected at plus 136. So basically, what does that mean? That means based on the metric, the average tight end should have 136 fewer yards after catch. This is why we nickname Tucker Kraft Yak and Cheese. All right, this is why Packers fans love Tucker Kraft, is because of his, not only his blocking effort, but his run after catch ability, much like George Kittle. That's why it, like my pre-draft comps was Tucker Kraft has the ceiling to be like George Kittle, and Luke Musgrave potentially had Travis Kelce, but he was more likely to be Mike Gesicki, right? So, yeah, Tucker Kraft, man, he has been phenomenal, and it's unfortunate because Luke Musgrave definitely does have talent, And we do miss Luke Musgrave in the passing game because he adds another, like, especially since Matt LaFleur loves to use multiple tight ends, or at least a rotation amongst tight ends, because you can build different play designs and play concepts off of the different skill sets that each of the different tight ends provide. No hate to Ben Simmons. I mean, he's a really good third string tight end as well. But this is what Tucker Kraft does. And it's unfortunate that Luke Musgrave has been injured basically this entire season, and he's had to miss participating in this offense and shining in this offense. But Tucker Kraft, man, the opportunities that he has gotten, he has exploited it. Right, second in target separation at 4.5 yards per target, and third in touchdowns. 7 touchdowns for Tucker Kraft this season, just third in the NFL for tight ends currently. And he's doing this while being targeted the 21st most amongst tight ends, with only 60 targets on the entire season. That just goes to show how effective Tucker Kraft is going to be. He is already a top 10 tight end, if not a top 5 tight end in the league right now. Right, I will place him in the top 10, basically in like the top 7 to be conservative. So, and partly one of the reasons why Tucker Kraft is so effective, like, it's not only his athletic ability and his natural ability in Jordan Love, but it's also because Matt LaFleur is genius at creating open space for him, especially using like a lot of layered passing concepts, like bringing in crosses upon posts and corner routes and go routes. You see that several times, right? You see Christian Watson on a go route. You see another wide receiver like Dobbs or Jaden Reed coming in on a cross or a slant. And then you have Tucker Kraft either coming in on like a dig route, or a shallow cross route, or, some other type of route that crosses the field against the grain. And he basically is almost lost amongst the sea of routes that is created because the defense is preoccupied with covering Christian Watson down the field, covering Jaden Reed in the slot, covering Romeo Dobbs on the opposite side because he's a monster. Tucker Kraft gets lost in the weeds because LaFleur is so creative at giving Kraft open space in crossers, leaks, in routes, dig routes, flat routes, right? Basically allowing him to be open using a lot of tight end screens as well. And recently, actually, I think we've done this like close to half dozen times, if I'm not wrong, in the last, several weeks. We've been using a sort of tight end QB sneak hybrid thing. I don't exactly know what the play call is, but basically, like, Jordan Love calls an initial play, and this is on like money downs and short downs, like 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2 or something like that, or 2nd and 2 or something like that. And we've seen this be so effective time and time again. Instead of relying on Jordan Love to get that 1 or 2 yards and risk injuring him, we use Tucker Kraft. Right. So he comes in from either side of the offensive line, whether he's lined up in line or in the slot. He's motioned inside, and the ball is immediately snapped. He takes the ball, and then he, sneaks in, a tight end sneak. So there are multiple ways that LaFleur uses tight end Kraft. Just goes to show the amount of flexibility that he has. He's not just like, stocky traditional tight end. Line up inside in line with the offensive line as a an H back, or like in the Y position. In F back position, right? He's not only that player, but he also lines up in the backfield. He lines up as a slot receiver. It's very effective, very creative usage for Tucker Kraft, and he's going to be a weapon for Jordan Love to use. And everything, offensively speaking, is humming on schedule. According to from Aaron Nagler, The Packers have scored 30 plus points in 5 straight games. And this is the second longest streak in team history. Just think about that. Second longest streak of 30 plus point games, 5 games in a row in team history, considering you have had Aaron Rodgers prime years for 15 years, Brett Favre prime years for 15 years, Bart Starr way back in the 60s with Don Hudson. Considering you've had this plethora of QB and offensive talent, this is the second longest streak in team history of scoring 30 plus points in 5 straight games. And they did 7 games in a row in 1963. So that is during the Bart Starr era, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, offensively speaking, I'm very excited for this matchup. And another thing that is a positive for Jordan Love and the Packers is Jordan Love's ability to not take sacks. I believe on the year, he is 7.7% in terms of pressure to sack ratio, which is one of the lowest. It is the lowest in the entire season, like one of the lowest in his career that we've seen in the past couple of years, or one of the lowest in the careers for an NFL quarterback in the past couple of years. That's 7.7 pressure to sack ratio. And it's not like the Packers don't have a great offensive line. They have a really good offensive line, but they still allow sacks. Now, Jordan Love is so good at not letting those pressures and those sacks get turned into sacks caused by him. That's another added bonus because the Vikings, well, they get a lot of sacks, but they also blitz a ton. So Jordan Love understanding blitzes, understanding defensive pressures, and having the ability to escape them and managing them is going to be a key for this Packers offense. So, yeah, keys to victory. Josh Jacobs early and often in the first half, right? First and second quarters. Then targeting Jaden Reed coming out of the backfield. And then targeting Tucker Kraft, creating open space for Tucker Kraft, letting him wreak havoc in the middle of the field for the defense against linebackers. So, yeah, that is important. Now, the question is going to be our Packers defense. Lately, this defense has been phenomenal. Dare I say Super Bowl caliber. They've played like it. Overall, since week 11, they have been 4th in EPA per rush and rushing success rate and 3rd in EPA per pass since week 11. So they've been on top of it, right? And more importantly, on the entire season, and lately more so, this front line of our defense is getting home. 6th in sacks with only 30th in blitz rate and allowing the 9th fewest passing touchdowns. So that goes to show that this Packers pass rush, much maligned at the beginning of the season, has come on to show, right? It has come out in full force and dominated opposing offensive lines, created pressure, and forcing the quarterback to make mistakes. All the while not blitzing a ton, right? 43 sacks on the year, which is 1 less than Minnesota, but Minnesota's 1st in blitz rate. The Packers are 30th in blitz rate. That just goes to show the amount of success that this Packers rotational D-line has of, Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare, Devontae Wyatt as a pass rush specialist up the interior when Kenny Clark is eating up 2 blocks. Brenton Cox Jr. now, Edge Cooper, Quay Walker when he was healthy, Eric Wilson, Isaiah McDuffie, Keyshawn Nixon coming in from the slot as a blitz, but like non-blitzes in terms of the defensive line. they have been on point, especially since the Preston Smith shout out, Preston Smith trade. So now, special shout outs on this defense. Edge Cooper, man. He is a defensive rookie of the year candidate. I don't care what anybody says. He's a top 5 defensive rookie of the year candidate because on only 38% of snaps this defense, he has 69 total tackles, 45 of them solo, 24 assisted, 8 tackles for loss, 6 QB hits, 3.5 sacks as a Mike linebacker, 1 fumble return, 1 forced fumble, and a pick, 4 passes defended. And besides the stats, he is flying out there. His football IQ is so phenomenal because that interception that he had, he was like nowhere near, but he recognized that the quarterback was going to throw that way, and he moved into the range of the pass and intercepted. Like, that just shows football IQ. And if you look more in terms of stats, since coming back from injury in the last 2 games, 17 total tackles, 3 TFLs, 1 sack, 1 interception, 2 PBUs, and 8 defensive stops. So credit to Edge Cooper. I mean, he is a monster in that second level. And I think this is if Edge Cooper was playing against Detroit, we would have won. We would have won clearly because Detroit targeted that middle of the field from the Packers so much early and often. And if Edge Cooper was there, 3 or 5 of those passes get defended, maybe one of them gets intercepted, and we win the game with like another field goal, right? With another offensive chance. So he is a difference maker. And as a rookie, he is making plays. And I'm so excited that Brian Gutekunst, this has probably been Brian Gutekunst, one of his best drafts ever, right? Drafting Evan Williams in the 4th round. I mean, Javon Bullard, Edge Cooper, right? We haven't seen much of Jordan Morgan, unfortunately, because he's been injured. But you look at some other players down the board. We still have yet to see Marshawn Lloyd and Tyron Hopper, unfortunately. Keaton Oladipo has made some. And now, Zane Anderson. Now, I'm going to talk about him in a little bit. But first, I wanted to talk about some edge rushers. Brenton Cox Jr., so this is one of the things that I wanted to say. Since the bye, which is when Preston Smith got traded, in terms of pass rush win rate on a true passing set, Brenton Cox, number 1 amongst 87 edge rushers at 43.8 pass rush win rate. LVN, Lucas Van Ness, 3rd amongst edge rushers. Rashawn Gary, 12th amongst edge rushers, and Kingsley Enikbar, 67th against edge rushers. So you clearly look at it. Brenton Cox, LVN, Rashawn Gary, they've been really, really phenomenal for us in these past couple of weeks since the bye week. So, yeah, credit where credit is due. This pass rush is getting home. Now, it's going to be difficult because, unfortunately, we got news that Jair is not going to be playing, Evan Williams is not going to be playing, and Javon Bullard is not going to be playing. So that means 3 out of our key, secondary pieces are going to be gone. But Zane Anderson has been another fantastic find for Brian Gutekunst this past game in Week 16. 4th amongst all safeties with the 85.2 PFF grade. 31 coverage snaps, 0 receptions allowed. His first interception, career interception, and 1 forced incompletion. So, fantastic move by Zane Anderson. Completely, surprise pick. Been playing really well in Week 16 and on special teams as well. So I'm excited to see him being paired with Xavier McKinney, and I'm just excited to see this secondary because Eric Stokes, much maligned again in the beginning of the season, coming off of that injury, coming off the recovery. But since the bye, again, it seems like the bye has solved a lot of issues for the Packers, especially defensively so. Eric Stokes since the bye, 6 catches allowed, only 22 receiving yards on 14 targets in his coverage. He gave up a touchdown in Detroit, but his coverage grade at PFF 80.5 ranks 4th amongst all CBs since week 11 or our bye. So Eric Stokes, yes. Is he going to have a future at the Green Bay Packers? Maybe not. But he has definitely been playing really, really well as of late. So we'll see if he can continue. We already saw Carrington Valentine the previous week, right? He's been playing spectacular as well. There are some more stats about him. Keyshawn Nixon, he can be a liability in the red zone. He can get turned around, but as a slot corner, coming in on blitzes, he can be effective. So the secondary is turning around. Pass rush is coming up, and especially for the Vikings, that Christian Darrisaw injury couldn't be a key mishap, but misfortune for the Vikings, because this pass rush can get home. It can get home quickly. Now, for the Vikings, I think the hope is that they target Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison early and often and scheme up ways to beat the zone coverage that the Packers run. Surprising, when coming into the season, everybody thought that Jeff Hafley was probably going to run a man coverage heavy scheme, right? That is not the case. Packers run 81% of the time zone coverage, partly because of lack of good man players, but also because we have really good zone players as well. Like Xavier McKinney is a great half field, third field zone safety, right? You got Zane Anderson, who's really good, but Evan Williams, who's a really good zone safety. You saw even snaps of I believe Javon Bullard played a couple of snaps of safety. He wasn't as effective, but he was pretty good as well. So I think you have players who can play well in zone. Not good man players per se, other than Jair Alexander and Carrington Valentine, probably. Other than them, you don't really have good man coverage players. So you stick with zone coverage. But hey, man, this has allowed the Packers to be the 3rd best EPA per pass on the entire season. So definitely he's doing something right. And a lot of this is like a lot of sim pressures and a lot of exotic blitzes that he brings in. But if he doesn't bring in blitz, it's a lot of stunts and a lot of modern like defensive principles being used, and uses that zone coverage and he disguises it well. So he confuses the offense. And this has led to not only being the 3rd best in terms of EPA per pass, but it's also very tough to get an explosive play, both pass and run play. The Packers are number 1 defense in terms of the fewest 40-yard passes allowed and the fewest 40-yard runs allowed. So for the Vikings, the hope is that you beat the pass rush by targeting Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison frequently, using a lot of motion to get rid of them and putting them in advantageous positions, and then targeting TJ Hawkinson against linebackers who are not edge Cooper. So really, this rests on Kevin O'Connell's creativity and Sam Darnold's ability to get the ball out of his hands very quickly. Now, considering the amount of injuries that the Vikings have, we're considering the Christian Darrisaw injury and the amount of injuries that the Packers have suffered on defense as well, but considering the pass rush has been playing well, the secondary has been playing well, they've improved since that week 5 encounter where the Packers only lost by 2 points. I think the Packers win. I think they win 28-27. I think it's going to be a close game because I think I'm going to give the nod to Kevin O'Connell because he's a mastermind. He's been very, very good at dialing up uh, successful offense, dialing up a successful offense this season. So I'm going to give it to him to be creative and to find exploits against this Packers defense because they are not perfect. I mean, we saw Detroit Lions carve them up. Obviously, that was because we didn't have Edgerrin Cooper, but still, nonetheless, we carved them up. They carved us up. So I think they're going to score points, but I think the Packers offense, Toyotathon Love, Josh Jacobs on a heater, Matt LaFleur on a heater. In the first half, I think the first half is going to decide everything because the first half becomes anything like that first matchup. I think the Vikings win because they have the ability to not only stress test other offenses and other teams, but just squeeze them. So that first quarter is going to be everything. So I think the Packers still win, but I am not confident. I hope we win, and I think we can win, but I would not be surprised at all if Minnesota pulls a last-minute victory, or just they won't dominate. I don't think either team's going to dominate because both teams are so well matched against each other. I just find it hard for one team to dominate the other. So I think the Packers win 28-27. All right, I'm not going to do any Masala games of the week. And unfortunately, I'm not going to talk about the Eagles versus Cowboys because A, Jalen Hurts is not going to be there. Most likely, it's going to be a loss. And B, Rugshek is not here. So anyways, thank you guys for joining. If you guys enjoyed it, please leave us a review at one of the 4 podcast platforms that we host our podcasts on: Apple, Google, Spotify, and Pocket Cast. Or hit us up at nflmasala@gmail.com, spelled as nflmasala@gmail.com. Or you could find us on our following social media platforms on Instagram and on Twitter or X. You can find us on @NFL Masala 2022. That is NFL Masala 2022. NFL MASALA 2022 on both Instagram and X. And yes, we are also on YouTube. So like, share, and subscribe for NFL Masala. Thank you. And I'm going to hit you guys with our signature outro. Go Pack, go. And for Rakshak's sake, fly Eagles, fly. And thank you guys. And have a good night.